Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Roberts. Transport Canada is reviewing aviation regulations across the country. Some advocacy groups are calling for Canadian regulations to meet international standards, which includes hiring more staff. As the CBC's Nadir Hashmi reports, that's something the GNWT could find difficult to do.
We're taking away people's other rights and we're putting lives in jeopardy in the case of an emergency.
Buzzy says Yellowknife Airport has only 2 firefighters on duty. And since it handles big planes with over 100 passengers, international standards require at least 9 firefighters. With only 2, Buzzy says the airport doesn't have the capacity to respond to a crash.
The longer intervention is delayed, the more damage is done, right? The more people are injured, the more lives potentially are lost.
Emergency rescue procedure is also a significant concern for Yellowknife firefighters, who say they have not received that training at all.
There is no plan or option for rescuing people from the aircraft.
The Yellowknife Firefighters Association is part of the International Association of Firefighters, IAFF. The group has been advocating for changes to federal aviation regulations for years.
We support what the IAFF is pushing nationwide, and we do support, an increase of safety for the citizens of Yellowknife.
That advocacy led to a private member's bill introduced by BC Liberal MP Ken Hardy. Hardy said that regulatory shortfalls concerning emergency responses at Canada's major airports are needlessly putting the safety of the flying public at risk. In December 2023, it was unanimously passed in the House of Commons. A Transport Canada spokesperson told CBC in an email that a review of aviation regulations is now ongoing. They said safety is our top priority, we are holding consultations, and we look forward to hearing from airports, firefighters, and other safety experts, though they didn't mention any timeline for implementing the new aviation regulations. The proposed changes could quadruple the firefighting staff at Yellowknife, but the government of the Northwest Territories would have to foot the bill, who say it will be difficult to find that funding.
That would triple our staff size. So that's you're talking $1.52 million, and then you've got to have vehicles to put those people in as well. So, you're several $1 million in expenses a year, which on a smaller budget would be huge for airports our size or smaller.
Straker says the airport is governed by the Canadian Aviation Regulations, not international standards, and that it meets all the required safety rules. Nadir Hashmi, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Air Tindy is in the process of adding flights to and from Fort Smith NWT as the community's only airline scales back its service. The president of Air Tindy says they already had plans to expand services to the community. But when they found out last week that Northwestern Air Lease would no longer offer scheduled service past January 15th, those plans were accelerated.
First week of January, probably we'll head to all the communities that Fort Smith serviced, and we'll meet with community leaders, Indigenous leadership as well, and just try and see what we can fit in for a schedule with the aircraft and flight crew requirements, restrictive duty days that we now have on us, and what the community needs as well.
Reynolds says they'll be providing flights to Fort Smith with both their own aircraft and third-party aircraft. He says they plan to fly from Edmonton, Fort Chipewyan, Yellowknife, and Fort Smith for part of the week. And for the rest of the week, Air Tindy will have direct flights between Yellowknife and Fort Smith. Reynolds says they'll announce booking details for the flights in the new year. It's a busy time of year for travel. Airports are bustling with Canadians flying off to celebrate the holidays across the country and around the world. Inevitably, though, there will be delays, even cancellations. Now, the federal government is pushing for new rules that will help passengers better cope with those problems. Julia Wong has more.
Ottawa is proposing new rules it hopes will strengthen air passenger rights, and they come as new numbers from StatsCan show travel is almost back up to pre-pandemic levels. The proposed changes would require airlines to provide meals and, if necessary, overnight accommodations when flights are delayed by at least 2 hours, except in exceptional circumstances. Carriers would also have to provide assistance to passengers, but only up to 72 hours after their flight is delayed or canceled. And they would have to provide a refund within 15 days down from the current 30 when a flight is canceled or delayed at least 3 hours. Passengers say they would be happy with anything that bolsters their rights.
I'm all on board with that, actually, and I think even the rights that we have right now have dramatically increased over the last few years with passenger rights.
Experts say the proposed changes are a step in the right direction, but also say they don't go far enough.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done here in Canada to make sure we have the same level of protection as other countries.
The Canadian Transportation Agency estimates the proposed changes would cost carriers $512 million over 10 years. It says for passengers, that works out to 99 cents per flight every year. The airline industry is taking issue with the proposed changes. The National Airlines Council of Canada, which represents the largest carriers in this country, says that the proposed regulations would be costly for carriers and would make air travel less affordable for Canadians. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
In Nunavut, mail is starting to make its way to Ranken Inlet after the month-long Canada Post strike. There's relief for some as their backed-up holiday parcels begin to arrive. Others are crossing their fingers. Selma Eccles reports.
The Canada Post in Ranken Inlet has been open during the postal strike, but there were no vehicles or people coming in or out of it. Kevin Sanguin was all smiles because he finally received the package to take home.
I think it's good to have the service restored. I think our postal service has a lot of problems to resolve. I think our people here need to be treated better, and I'm glad to have mail. And Merry Christmas, everyone.
Esther Aglukak says she is excited that the presents she ordered in November might actually make it in before Christmas. Aglukak says even if the Christmas presents don't make it on time, she will still give the gifts to her children. She says, I'm still going to give my gifts because they're expecting them. I'm just going to give the presents to them. While mail and packages are slowly coming in, a number of residents said it's too late to send out gifts this year, but they will be so ready next year. Selma Eccles, CBC News, Ranken Inlet.
Canada Post is set to start accepting new international mail and parcels today. The post office says it expects to work through much of its backlog before Christmas. But the corporation is warning that delivery delays will probably continue until early January. Package delivery between urban centers may take an extra 2 or 3 days. Parcels traveling longer distances could face delays of up to 10 days. Up Here magazine is under new ownership. 2 staff members officially took over the publication just over a week ago. The magazine is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. Sherry Rio is one of the new owners. She spoke to the CBC earlier about what the magazine means to Northerners.
It's a true capture of what the North actually is. Our writers are from the North. They've experienced it. They know what they're talking about. So when you're reading Up Here magazine, you know, if you're a local or if you spent time here, you're not like you're seeing yourself on the pages. And if you're not physically or literally seeing yourself, which is quite common, you're seeing people you know, people you've met, or just similarities to your own life. Like you're just like, oh, I was there. And you're showing your friends and family from the South, perhaps. This is my experience. This is what it was like up there. You know, I was in another magazine before, and I just thought that it was an in-flight magazine, not Up Here, but just seeing myself on that page almost like made, you know, something that wasn't real. You know, like you always see magazines and TV shows and think it's all, you know, Hollywood and fake and actors and this and that. But when you actually see yourself on it, it just takes a whole other level. So I think readers, like when they're reading it, they can see themselves in part of the world that they've never imagined seeing, or if they have experienced it, miss it, you know, it's just like a vacation back for them. So it's just the true reality of what the North is like. So I think that's why it's important to people.
Rio says the structure, feel, and vibe of the magazine will all remain the same, but they might try to bring some modern technology into the operations. The numbers are in for this year's Christmas bird count in Yellowknife. Volunteer bird watchers were out counting birds on Saturday. Observers noted 14 different species. They counted fewer ravens this year, 1,700 compared to a high of 3,000 a few years ago. And volunteer Reed Hildebrandt says there was good news for people concerned about the competition between Canada jays and the invasive magpie species.
We had a high number of magpies, but also the highest number of gray jays, Canada jays, that we've seen in the past 10 years. So that was a kind of a reassuring, maybe leveling off of the trend where magpies have been pushing out Canada jays. So we've been kind of watching for good news on that front.
Hildebrandt says they also counted the highest number of house sparrows on record. He says people spotted over 600 of them compared to a previous high of just over 500. The Audubon Society's Christmas bird count happens around Christmas time in communities across Canada. It's one of the two main bird counts that scientists use to keep an eye on bird populations. This is CBC North on your smart TV because CBC News is now streaming local. Get local headlines, weather, and community notices, plus newscasts and live programming on your favorite connected device, all for free. It's called the CBC News North streaming channel. You can see your community on your connected TV and mobile devices. CBC News North, your local news streaming channel, is now available.
Earth is our collective home. That makes us all family. As family, we strive to love and protect each other. Diversity of species is our strength. We are all connected. We survive and thrive together. We celebrate many things this season and make many choices. Taking care of our family should be the easiest. We're in this together.
Being there means being here. Russian forces, they want it badly. It's just a fraction of the mess here in Port-aux-Basques. To witness, to listen, to share. I'm so sorry. I do worry about them. Adrian Arsenault reports on CBC News, stream free.
We're often drawn to people who have something we want in ourselves.
But it doesn't mean living like you're running out of time. It means living in a place of hope.
Switching between standard and daylight saving time usually only causes mistakes the first day of the change. But in a northern British Columbia town, a quirk of geography means that for half the year, there are two times to choose from. The CBC's Cheryl Kawaja tells us what time it is in Atlin.
A bumper sticker on a truck parked just outside the cafe reads Atlin, Yukon, a favorite joke of many here.
What's Yukon, you know? It's not too far from here.
We are part of the Yukon. This line on the map doesn't make sense to us, to most of us, I must say.
Whitehorse, Yukon is a 2-hour drive up the only road out of Atlin and a different time zone. It's where everyone goes for a big grocery run, a dentist, the hospital.
What time is it now? I don't know. I have no idea. It's either, I think it's about 1:30, is it? Or 12:30? I don't know. It's, you know, in the afternoon. Good afternoon.
One indication that Atlanites aren't terribly concerned about time is the town clock. It actually hasn't worked in years. In 2020, the Yukon stopped changing its clocks, permanent daylight time. That means it's not in sync with BC in the winter. Most of the town has decided to stick with Yukon time.
Confusing. Yeah, it's really confusing.
Because our tablets and our computers and the television are all on BC time.
I'm teaching here, and we use Yukon time for the kids.
The Indigenous government here, the Taku River Tlingit, recently announced it is officially on Yukon time, in part to help elders who go back and forth to Whitehorse for medical appointments. Not everyone is on board. Corporal Chris Mahoney points out legally Atlin is on BC Pacific time.
It's about public safety for me, and yeah, I just want everybody to be on the same page.
And to make it all the more confusing, a couple of weeks ago, for the first time ever, Atlin got cell service. The cell tower is on Yukon time.
Inevitably, you invite somebody over and they
They're either an hour early or an hour late, depending on your point of view. But
For many Atlanites, though,
you know what? It all works out. You just get up an hour earlier.
Cheryl Kawaja, CBC News, Atlin, BC.
The Trondequetchin First Nation is one step closer to constructing what it says will be the biggest building in Dawson City, Yukon. The First Nation has secured nearly $25 million in federal funding to build a heritage complex. The 18,000 square foot, two-story building will include an oral history recording studio, a library, archives, and classrooms. The construction tender will be posted in January, and construction is anticipated to start in the spring. Yukon MP Brendan Hanley made the joint announcement at a press conference last week. Hanley says the funding comes from the federal government's Green and Inclusive Communities Building Program. He says the facility will directly benefit the health and well-being of all Trondequetchin citizens.
Will help the Trondequetchin First Nation grow by creating a space where members of the community will be able to gather, to learn, and so important to reconnect with Indigenous culture and language, First Nation, the Han culture and language.
That was Yukon MP Brendan Hanley. The World Junior Hockey Championships begin on Boxing Day in Ottawa. Canada will be trying to redeem itself after finishing a disappointing 5th last year. One player looking to help them strike gold is a young Indigenous hockey phenom from the Yukon. As the CBC's George Moratis tells us, he's a player who's already won over his community, and now he's hoping to do the same for his country.
We have a whole bunch of jerseys in here, but my mom also made this super special vest for Gav. Gav's from the Wolf clan. This is super special for him to be able to represent the Indigenous people and the First Nations across Canada. So I'm going to pack this for him and hope that he'll be able to wear it proudly.
This vest is about to make a special trip to Ottawa. The McKennas are going too, and they couldn't be happier about it. That's because they're going to be watching their son play for Team Canada at the World Juniors.
Christmas is going to be a little bit different this year. But yeah, we're all beyond excited. It's just, it all feels surreal at this point, to be honest. This is something that he's wanted for so long that it's happening, and yeah, it's very exciting for us.
McKenna making Team Canada is a big deal. For one, he's young, he's Indigenous, and he's from the Yukon, where not a lot of hockey players have gotten this opportunity.
The fact that we are seeing something amazing happening right before our eyes, the fact that we're going into, in a couple weeks, to the biggest world stadium outside the Olympics, and one of our Yukon boys are going to be on showcase. I think it is almost like a fairy tale.
Players making Team Canada at 16 is rare. It's only happened 8 times in the tournament's history, and those that do have gone on to become some of the game's greats.
We spend so much time on looking at birth certificates and instead of just looking at how players play. Gavin's brilliant. I mean, there's no question. He's amongst the best players outside the NHL. Full stop. Drafted or undrafted.
McKenna's hockey career is still only just starting, but already it's full of accomplishments. CHL Rookie of the Year, under 18 gold medalist, and now a member of Team Canada's World Juniors. He's come a long way from his early days in Whitehorse.
He was 2 years old there. This particular day, he was just out there alone and just ripping along the ice and having a great time, and he kept going. And there was no stopping him. He wanted to be on the ice all of the time.
McKenna isn't the first Yukoner to make Canada's World Junior team. Dylan Cousins won gold in 2020. McKenna, a Trondequetchin citizen, is, however, the first First Nations player from the Yukon to earn the honor.
But what stands out to me is when we get feedback from his coaches, his teammates, they always come back and say, Gavin is just a really good person. So, to be a role model for the people of his First Nation and whatnot, I think is very, very important. And I think that's probably what we're most proud of as parents.
McKenna is still not eligible for the NHL draft until 2026. He's expected to go first overall. If that happens, he'll become the first First Nation citizen to ever do so. McKenna and Team Canada opened the World Juniors on Boxing Day against Finland. George Moratis, CBC News, Whitehorse.
The round-the-world voyage of Santa Claus is just around the corner. The jolly old elf has his list, he's checking it twice, and he and his team of reindeer are preparing to make their deliveries. The CBC's Darius Madavi investigates the mystery and the magic of Santa's fantastic flight.
It's that time of year again. Santa is getting ready to make his big trip around the world. Now, for most people, St. Nick is a symbol of kindness and good tidings, the bringer of presents and cheer. But since I was a kid, the thing Santa brought me most was questions. Most importantly, how exactly does he do it? How fast does he travel? How heavy are all those presents? How many cookies can one man eat? These are not easy questions. So we got in touch with Don Lincoln, one of the world's leading physicists. And together, we're going to get you answers. Question 1. How fast is Santa's sleigh? This is the question that has been bugging me ever since I got my very first present from Santa. I mean, if I want to visit my aunt across Canada, it would take me over 6 hours just to fly there. So how could Santa possibly get all the way around the world in one night? Well, the first thing to remember is that it's not night everywhere at the same time. Santa can be delivering presents in Australia while Canadians are just waking up on Christmas Eve. That means Santa actually has a full day and a half to deliver presents, which helps a lot.
If he spends more than 1,000 to the second in any one house, that uses up his time budget. So Santa cannot dwell. He doesn't fart around. He does his business and he gets on to the next house.
Don also says Santa will have to travel somewhere between 200 and 1,000 kilometers every second. In other words, crazy fast.
If you look at the speed of a meteor is traveling at, say, 10 to 70 kilometers per second. So in order for Santa to do this, he's going to be having to travel faster than a meteor.
Now, think about what happens when a meteor hits Earth's atmosphere. Whoosh! As you can imagine, Santa would like to avoid that. Luckily, Don has an idea for how Santa avoids burning up.
That whole nose Rudolph's getting red, it's just because it's so hot. It absorbs all the heat and deflects it away from Santa. I mean, I'm convinced that's what happens.
And hey, if we can build those heat shields into our rocket ships, who says Santa can't do the same for a reindeer? Now, question 2, how much do all those presents weigh? Because moving fast is one thing, but have you ever had to run down the street with a heavy backpack on? Now, imagine your backpack is a sack full of billions of presents. Yikes. So let's say everyone who celebrates Christmas gets a couple gifts from Santa. Turns out that adds up fast.
So you do the math, and that turns out to be something like 30 million tons. So it's an enormous mass. It is about half the mass of the Great Pyramid at Giza.
Imagine trying to load 6 million elephants onto a plane and still being able to take off. I mean, those are some strong reindeer pulling Santa's sleigh. And Don had one other scientific insight to share.
What I've determined also is that Santa must have a very, very stretchy bag that's very strong in order to squish all those things so that it can fit in the sleigh.
Now, of course, as Santa travels around the world, he's dropping off presents. So the sleigh should be getting lighter. But then again, thanks to another Christmas tradition, Santa himself is getting heavier. Which is question 3. How does Santa eat so much? Now, it's no question that Santa is very generous. But as a thank you, we do give him something back, some delicious milk and cookies. But when you're visiting millions of homes, that's a lot of cookies.
And it turns out to be something in the ballpark of 20 billion calories, which you think you put on weight over the Christmas holidays. I can't even imagine Santa. That turns out to be equivalent to about the 43,000 full tanks of gas. Incredible amount of energy.
That's about 10 million times the recommended number of calories for the average adult. It's so much energy that it actually makes more sense to compare it to rocket fuel than to food. If you burned all those cookies, you would get more energy than it took to get Neil Armstrong to the moon on a rocket ship. But still, when a cookie looks particularly delicious, I'm sure Santa will have a nibble. So to wrap up, several minutes, a lot of assumptions, and some clever math later, we've got our answer. Santa is very fast, very strong, and very hungry. With his reindeer, he can do things that no other person could do. So whether it's super advanced technology or some good old-fashioned Christmas magic, let's be thankful that he's up there, racing around the world, so we can all stay nestled, all snug in our beds. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays from all of us at CBC.
The spirit of the season is strong in Dawson City. As Chris McIntyre reports, in the form of a holiday jingle, one man's act of Yuletide spirit is illuminating the whole town.
In the quiet town of Dawson City, it's a special time of year. One man has been working tirelessly to spread some Christmas cheer. It's not old Saint Nick, or Kris Kringle, or any of his elves. His name is Jim Bob, and he's an interesting guy. You can hear it for yourselves.
He's the kindest man you'll ever meet.
Well, he shops at my store. He's a sticker fan, actually. He likes stickers.
I see him, running around and, bringing people around and, and I know his house is pretty much decorated.
Now, Jim Bob is shy, so he declined an interview with me, but he agreed to let me show his well-known home full of reindeers and Christmas trees. The hardest part looks like the roof. Every bulb is placed just right. You could probably see his house from space when his lights turn on at night.
You can't miss it. It's beautiful. It makes you feel nostalgia and excited for everything to do with Christmas.
Well, I think it's encouraging other people. They're not in a Christmas spirit and to be in this. And, I think it's his passions. And you should keep going.
But there is a con with all the lights on. It's not something spoken about, because every time he turns his lights on, the rest of Dawson's lights go out. But what goes up, like the saying goes, always must come down. But every year, when Christmas is near, Jim Bob's lights illuminate the town. Chris McIntyre, CBC News, Dawson City.
Well done, Chris. That was an early Christmas gift to us all. That is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night. This is CBC North on your smart TV, because CBC News is now streaming local. Local news and weather on your connected TV or favorite device. CBC News North, streaming now.
When we work to end inequity, we help start something better. Support Even the Odds.
Moments that are so on trend right now.